Welcome to the Academy of Esports podcast. I am your host, James O'Hagan, and today this is somebody who I've been wanting to interview for years. Well, I mean, the podcast is only 3 years old, so it's kind of hard to say it, make it sound like it's that long going back. But I want to introduce Clint Kennedy today. Clint has been is involved in Scholastic Esports for a number of years now. First starting at the state of Connecticut, then going to work for PlayVS, and now working for NASEF. And he's on the advisory board with me for UGC, and I think we do a couple of other things too, don't we, Clint? Together, probably.
The list is long and semi-distinguished, but yeah, we're working on a lot of things. Absolutely.
But you're an educator like me, right? I mean,
that is true. That is true.
Where did you start teaching? What was your first teaching job?
Yeah, so yeah, this goes back a ways. So I've worked for 3 different school districts in my career, actually 4 if you count a private school stop. So I really spent my first 18 years in public and private schools in Connecticut and in New York. I've been a teacher, a professor, a chief technology officer, tech director, and really when esports hit my radar screen, when it actually kind of changed my life, if you will, I was a central office administrator in a city called New London in Connecticut. It had a series of high schools and the like. But really where it started, if I may, Jim, just very quickly,
Sure.
And some of the people have heard this story, but I was tasked with, in this central office position, to build out what we were calling kind of a horizontal soft skills curriculum. How do we integrate partnership for 21st century skills standards horizontally across the traditional silos of English, science, math, social studies, and so forth. So we've been talking about it a lot. We kind of had a set of standards and experiences we wanted students to have, but I didn't want this to be yet another, top-down, adult-created, adult-emphasized program that kids will probably end up saying, yeah, it's boring like the rest of school. So I thought I was being a good progressive educational leader, and I organized a group of student leaders. We came together at computer lab. I had a bunch of questions I wanted to ask them. And 2 young men were in the back, heads down on computers, and I said, knock it off. I want you to be with me. I value your input. And they came to me afterwards and said, Dr. K, listen, we're sorry, but we didn't want to ruin, this game for 8 other people. I was like, what are you talking about, 8 other people? It was the 2 of you. Everybody else was paying attention. And they're like, no. We were playing this game called League of Legends, and it's 5-on-5, and we were 2 of the 10 players and so forth. And just so you know, all these standard things you're talking about are in this game. And I thought they were giving me a line. Just they didn't want me in trouble. They weren't in trouble. So I called their bluff. I said, fine, let's play. So I sat down with them on the spot, and I played my first game of League of Legends. I played Heimerdinger support, stole all the CS in the bot lane, and we didn't forfeit in 20, but we got blown up. But I had kind of an aha moment. I was like, they were 100% right. They were not trying to not be in trouble. They knew what they were talking about. And that kind of led me on this journey of how can we provide student-led, student experiences that they're signaling they want to be part of to help not really deliver, but provide experiences for students to build skills, habits of mind, and knowledge around these soft skills. Because we know employers and colleges and even the military are saying, these are the things we can't teach on the job. We need students to come with this. How do we integrate that in an environment that's not typical education or school, but what they're saying they want, and provide that extra value on it. So we started a club. I had 83 students show up with me in a computer lab the first day. We played.
Wait. Say that number again.
83 students and me in a 28 station computer lab. Excuse me. Luckily, this was a fairly newer high school, and we had kind of an overflow room, but it's education, so we can't have students in a room that are not supervised. We worked it out. But we did that, and we were playing a bunch of high school star league, and teams weren't showing up, or we weren't really matched well, and it wasn't a good feeling. So I hired 12 high school interns. I say hire as in I promised a letter of recommendation if they finished successfully, and I bought them pizza every time we got together. Healthy pizza, I promise. And we started what became Connecticut Esports, which eventually, again, with the help of those interns, we've got the State High School Academic and Athletic Association, because it's combined in Connecticut, to bless the first sanctioned state high school esports league, which I give all the credit to those students because they did all the heavy lifting.
It's amazing what happens when you give kids the authority, because a lot of times they don't feel like I think that a lot of high school kids really feel that they have that authority to do something like this. And it just takes that one adult to just say, just kind of like how you and I came into this, where it was that supervisor said, okay, we need you to do something, right? And mine came to me and said, hey, what's this esports thing? Can you maybe get us going on this? And I'm like, absolutely. Games were so taboo in school for so long. And it just takes that one little agency. But now with kids, even, I have one right now who I'm working with in my virtual program. And I said, well, I want to, have you be a youth apprentice for me in the fall. I want you to stay in the virtual program. I want you to be social media. I want you to get your graphic design work done. I want you to learn how to use OBS.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going to pay you. He goes, what? I go, yeah, is $10 an hour work for you? And he's like, I was going to do this for nothing. But it's awesome. It's like having that, giving them that moment that connects them to school is so powerful.
Yeah. And I would say, forget esports for a second. It's giving students permission to be in control or be on the team for their own education is something that we as educators typically fail miserably at. We think education is something that we do unto the students, as opposed to linking arms and partnering with them and saying, no, this is ultimately your journey. How can we help guide you, provide, bumpers in the gutters and things like that to keep them out of it. But ultimately it's them. And the sooner we give them experiences and they construct that meaning on their own, then we see it in school, and then it just reaps better rewards down the road in career and college and the like. So yeah, I'm super proud of what those students did and how we got started. I still talk and play. Those students still carry me sometimes when we're playing League. So yes, it's it was a great an eye-opener for me, and it has set me on this path now for the last 5.5, 6 years on how we can take that to scale and provide that opportunity and that permission to students to do it across the country, around the world. And
that kind of segues us into, I guess, the next big part of your journey. I mean, Connecticut is something I think that is very important and important to recognize that, again, you helped bring things to a state level. But then you moved on to a group that was trying to bring things to a national level. And I actually know a few of the people who work for PlayVS. James Kozaczuk and I go back before PlayVS as well. When we were
James is a friend. Yep.
Yeah, we were talking a lot about these ideas that we're talking about of, High School Star League was just, it was a league, right? But
it was a league.
With the best, I think they get beat up a lot, but they had the best of intentions, right? It was basically a group of kids who just said, you know what, we want to have a good experience. These were kids who did try to take this agency, and they didn't do it well, but it was something.
It was a great next step for us because we were sitting in our computer lab with those 83 some odd students. And to be fair, it shrunk down to 50 or 60 once I had to say, we can't play Siege or Call of Duty or whatever. So, but it stayed pretty high for the games we were playing. So it's to me, that is there's a natural next step, or at least in my career, there was a natural next step. And actually, fun fact, the director of the Connecticut Association that kind of blessed it after 4 very intense meetings is a woman named Dr. Carissa Nyhoff. And she went from leadership in Connecticut she became the executive director and currently is of the NFHS. And for those of you who are not familiar with the NFHS, think of it as the NCAA for middle and high school, secondary schools. So she knew what we did, obviously, in Connecticut. And when she went to the national level, she said, we should be doing this at scale at the national level. And I give her a lot of credit for that. She took it on in Connecticut and then wanted to keep going. So awesome. So she put me in touch with a group that they had just signed with the NFHS network. The NFHS and the NFHS network are 2 different entities, very closely related, kind of think of nonprofit and then a for-profit wing for that. And the NFHS network had just signed a contract with PlayVS. So I was introduced to the PlayVS team. I was taken out to LA, which I thought was cool. I had never been to LA.
I grew up in Northern California. You can have Southern California.
I had done San Diego and San Fran. I had never done LA, and it was cool. It was 2 blocks from the pier in Santa Monica. So I was certainly excited about that opportunity and a hero to my kids when I was taking pictures of the sunset out there. And no, I didn't meet any of the Kardashians. But I believed in this idea of taking what I was able to do successfully in Connecticut with those students and a lot of students getting value out of it. And can we take this to the national level? So I worked almost 2 years at PlayVS as the director of education. I left PlayVS and am not looking back. I have some wonderful colleagues that are there, although that number is getting smaller and smaller because of the increasingly growing turnover that PlayVS is seeing in staffing. But I really left for two reasons. And a lot of people who are tuning in, I've talked PlayVS a lot with a lot of people, so this isn't a secret. But I was hired as the director of education, and with a promise that we would build not only a competitive platform, but we would be providing educational opportunities and a curriculum track and CTE opportunities and the like as part of that. That never transpired. And as part of my job, I was really responsible for maintaining the relationship with the NFHS and all the state leaders. Because again, the NFHS membership are state leaders. We were trying to go in and then have a conversation with each of the 50 states plus DC and say, hey, listen, let's replicate this model in your state with your guidelines, with your rules, with your culture, and so forth. And we got to about 23 states, which I thought was really cool. But then the business model started to change internally at PlayVS, and without it getting into specifics, I was no longer able to support both the ecosystem and what I knew was right for kids and schools and the long-term growth, or at least what I believe is right for that long-term growth, with the business model that I was expected as an employee to say and put out there and sell to these states. So instead of having to say or do something that I thought was not in the best interests of students, of states, etc., I'm very fortunate that I'm at a point in my career where I can make a move and push on what I see as the right side of Scholastic Esports, and that's what I'm doing now.
Well, and let's pause, because I think it's important also to say too, again, not just were you working for them. I was looking back in some of my notes. 2018, I wrote I think I wrote something brief because you were looking at Georgia as one of the first states for.
It was
for
one of the original 5 for PlayVS. Yes.
Yeah, and I wrote a little testimonial for that. I think I spoke even on a panel on PlayVS' behalf. I was very excited, but just like you said too, the model changed, and I think once series funding starts taking over, once you start getting into this culture of we have investors that we have to answer to, I noticed that very quickly it became, well, we have 13,000 schools waitlisted and we have 25,000, students or whatever. The numbers were just, you're looking at it going, I know everybody in my state and none of us are PlayVS. I'm calling all these other states going, are you guys doing it? No, we're not. And it was like the numbers were getting inflated to a point where I'm all about academic integrity, honesty. I want transparency, especially when you're working with kids, especially when you're working with schools. We're not exactly the best place. If you're looking to make money quick, schools are not the place to start making money quick.
No, you need to be in for the long haul, and it needs to be students first. I live in a capitalist society, and I think that one of the biggest issues with Scholastic Esports right now is we have about 50% of our coaches or GMs doing it as a labor of love and not getting paid, and they're not typically out there asking for dollars, but football coaches get paid, robotics general managers get paid. I get paid for the work I do. I'm assuming you do, Jim, in your day job. There's nothing wrong with getting paid. I think that sends the right signal to we value it. We should be paying these adults who are helping facilitate these opportunities for students. But if I can go back for a second, too,
Sure.
When we start talking about numbers that companies like PlayVS or others are putting out in the space, in the ether, I think everyone should be well attuned, as you are, Jim, to this idea of what's the difference between actively participating schools in a league or an opportunity or curriculum pieces, what have you, and those on a waiting list. A waiting list, as we all know in this world, is pretty easy to get onto. If one student signs up a form with 4 spaces, its first, last, school, and an email, that could be a waiting list. So I think people should be should ask that second level question and say, great, we need to understand exactly what's happening in this ecosystem, who's doing what to whom, and who are the players that are representing the values and beliefs of our schools, of our students, of our parents, of our administrators and the like, and who may have other goals and objectives. They may not be bad goals and objectives, but I clearly want everyone to understand what the goals are, and then you can make a personal decision or a school-based decision on what the most appropriate way forward is for your school as we chart these very early days. I know it doesn't seem like it for some of us, but these very early days of what an esports experience looks like in a school.
And it's a very, I don't want to say the word, okay, I'll say dangerous. Unprofessional, I don't know. I'll just say dangerous. I can't think of a better way to say it. but that's the other part of the model that really started to bother me was just how they were using kids as Trojan horses to get a foothold into a school. Because as an educator, you want to serve your kids. You want to kids come at you with something exciting they want to do. You're like, okay, I'm going to bend over backwards to make it happen. And as you said, 50% labor of love are doing it for no money. And yet you're being told to, you're getting a high pressure sales tactic from somebody who you don't know, who's coming to you calling saying, well, your kids here at your school want to work with us. Don't you want to make that happen for them? And again, of course, as an educator, you're like, boy, I'd really love to do that. I'd really love to, but I have all these channels to go through. Oh, no. We'll set everything up for you. Don't worry about it. We're all vetted. We're with the NFHS. We have, we're with your state association. Everything will be fine. That is exactly the wrong conversation to sometimes present to a school, because now you're not only putting that student at liability, you're potentially putting a teacher at liability if something should go wrong. A principal who doesn't know about it now is liable. School board doesn't know about it, they're liable. I mean, there's a ton of different things that can go off the rails. You can't come into, unfortunately, as much as some of us would love to blow up the model of how school is done, there's reasons why we operate this way. Number one, we're public entity, we're taxpayer funded, especially at the public school level. And number two, we're working with minors. Like you can't. Absolutely.
So to me, there's a natural tension almost in the point you just made, but also the point we discussed earlier, where we want to empower students to be part of the designing and implementation of their education. So to me, what I've been trying to focus on in the conversations I have day in and day out is do your homework. Try to reach out, don't be shy, and connect with people on all these wonderful social tools that we have and so forth, and educate yourself on what those models are, what the possibilities are, how they may be analogous to others like robotics or traditional sports or what have you, and then chart a way forward for you. There's quite a few models out there. We kind of know who the main players are in Scholastic Esports right now. I would be willing to bet it's not going to look like this next year. It's going to be different, and the year after, because it's early days. It's, to me, we're kind of sophomore year, if I can use this loose analogy, where freshman year, everybody hung a shingle out. Everybody can do anything, and you have all these different choices. We're kind of sophomore year now, and I'm going to mix metaphors, I guess, here, but people are on the island and are saying, ooh, I need to have an alliance here. If we're going to, there's too many of us trying to do this with very different models. The better models need to surface, the more appropriate models need to surface, and we're going to need to partner up so that we make sure we're providing, support and services and answering questions on time and being responsive to what an individual state, an individual school, or an individual student really needs. And that takes scale, and that takes partnership. So I appreciate...
And it takes realistic expectations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because a lot of these... come on, Clint, you know this too. Let's take esports out of it. There's a company that has a silver bullet solution that's going to cure all you want your reading problem eliminated? We've got the product for you. Yep. Math problem? Oh, we got this taken care of for you. Sure. That standardized test? We've got the prep stuff for you that's going to have all your kids passing at 100%. Sure. We're used to seeing these. That's why we're so good at sniffing these things out early.
Scratch out No Child Left Behind and write Common Core in. Now cross out Common Core. Maybe we'll write esports in or something. Yeah, it's sure. There's a lot of Me Too's, and it's a very easy get supposedly to it, but it doesn't speak to what's truly valuable for our students. And to your point, Jim, it doesn't pass the smell test for more and more educators all the time. So that's why I'm very excited about kind of where the space is, because people, the curtains being peeled back on some of the early players in, and I think that more and more people have educated themselves and can ask those important questions, and I see a brighter future ahead and better opportunities for schools and kids. Absolutely.
And I know too that the state associations, the nonprofit state associations made up of educators are popping up, and they're of different quality and different variety.
Sure.
Some better supported than others. I got to say, in the last year, Garden State Esports and TechSef are two of the ones I got to interview Chris Avilas yesterday and the work that they've been doing, and then Danielle Johnson, Danny Martin's in chat. He's one of these private people who has been very supportive of state associations. I can see where there's so many great ones, and I see the ones that are struggling. And I'll be honest, ours in Wisconsin is struggling a little bit. It's fraying because it is a ton of work. I don't think people realize just how much work it is to put together an association and then do the nonprofit status, because nonprofit rules, you know, you can't just go out and say, now give me money. There's
Sure.
rules that you have to follow when it comes to even forming a nonprofit. So but I love seeing the evolution, as you're talking about, the sophomore yearness of where we are right now.
Yeah, and to double down on your point or explore that a little more too, even all the work that I've done, talking to leadership at every state association and so forth, I am still not convinced that there's one implementation model that will work best. And my experience was that athletic model. And I get concerned about that because, you know, it goes all the way back to our esports, real sports. And I have spent so many breaths in having this conversation with people, and I can make a really good argument, I think, on both sides of the equation. But to be honest, I don't really care. It's the experience that I want to help provide, those opportunities around esports that I want to provide to schools and students so that they can explore this with that scaffolding and so forth we can call it sports or we can not. We can put it under the athletic banner or not. Now, obviously there are complications or repercussions or rules of the road that we have to follow if it is categorized as a sport or not. But I'm not interested in that necessarily. I'm interested in this being an opportunity for students. There's huge opportunities with these athletic associations, although with COVID, obviously a lot of them are in pretty bad situation because of ticket sales and postponed seasons and the like. So they either say no thank you to esports because we're just trying to keep the ship afloat, or they're saying, great, we need another revenue generator. So yes, let's explore that more. But if their first instinct is revenue generator, that to me opens up, you know, you walk through that door and there's 10 more doors to walk through and talk about. So I like the athletic model. I also like using FIRST Robotics. That's something that I've been part of over my years in education as a really interesting model. I'm less concerned about what that model looks like, you know, from a high level and what we call it, but I want these experiences to be open to students, and that's both educationally as well as competitively. We know the hook is competition and we love the games, and I had to stop playing Wild Rift to get on this podcast episode. Thank you, Jim. But I don't want to sell the lie too, because every time I hear somebody say, oh, well, you can get scholarship dollars and you can get into the big school that you didn't think you could get into and so forth. It's the same thing as traditional sports. The percentage of students that actually are eligible for that. It's a great goal, and please shoot for the moon, but I much prefer to have these conversations around a pathway to industry or pathway to your community as opposed to pathway to pro. And some of the players that are in Scholastic Esports right now are very focused on that funnel of pathway to pro. That's kind of the big picture if you peel back the layers. And to me, that we're doing a disservice if we don't paint the fuller picture.
Mm-hmm. And let's be real about those scholarships, because people hear esports scholarships and they think Division I football, basketball, you know, really.
Wouldn't it be nice?
But when you start to look at it, it's a lot of these, especially a lot of small colleges are looking at this as a way to diversify their pool, to bring in kids who maybe they wouldn't get at before. And it's not a full ride. We're talking, and this is nothing to scoff at, please. I'm not trying to, but you know, some of these small schools, you look at it and go, what's their tuition? It's got to be like 14, 15. No, we're talking like $30,000. And some of these kids are getting $3,000 off, which means they're either having to take on debt or having to take on loans. It's getting them necessarily. And I don't want to, as you're right, we don't want to candy coat this. We don't want to missell any of this. There's still a cost to a lot of these. Those prime seats are very few and far between. Like I said, not like Division I football or basketball where you can get a full ride for 80 kids in a school year. But, you know, looking at where we're at right now, especially because with the changing landscape, as you said, the sophomore year, where is, I guess, you know, for the for-profits that are up there right now? We got HSEL, PlayVS, EGF. Where are the for-profits, I guess, biggest competition? Is it coming from the state associations? Is it coming from, I mean, you're wearing a little T-shirt right here that you can show
I'm a little
off
biased in where this may be headed. Yes,
but is the competition going to be coming from someone who can do just a tournament platform, and then we can run our own thing? I mean,
I'm going to bake this down, at least my take, not necessarily for any one company, but I see kind of two camps forming. I see the partnered with potentially state associations or some large organization for profit charging for competition and educational opportunities, CTE work and so forth may be part of the elevator pitch, but may be still getting baked in the back room somehow. And then I see this other group that's saying, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, competition, curriculum and so forth, these opportunities are free, but nothing in life is free. So is there a multimedia rights or sponsorship broadcast model that can be backed by that? I love the model of not in all cases. I like the model where there's some large organizations across the country. There's what was Outfront Media, which is now part of Playfly, and TPG and CSMG, and some of these multimedia rights organizations that are partnering with some of these esports orgs, and they're saying, great, let's lower the bar and make this equitable so anybody who wants to participate and compete can. Now, we know there are always other blockers that we're working on as a community to remove, but let's just say that's the case. They can then get a value add from that through these broadcast and media rights. And to me, it's a win-win in that it's exposure for students, for schools, for upcoming players and the like, assuming it's done appropriately and correctly with permission of these schools and students and, of course, parents. Mm-hmm. And also, I would argue that there's actually some shared piece of the pie for that. If I think of NASEF as a very specific example, and you mentioned Garden State Esports, and I'm not speaking for Chris, this is just an example. If Chris is providing free competition or any NASEF affiliate, and there's an opportunity for an organization to come in and broadcast that far and wide, now you could argue, well, Twitch is your biggest megaphone out there, but getting eyeballs and getting a following and so forth takes time. Then there could be some value add to building your community. There could be value add to appropriate sponsors, hopefully community and other, appropriate Scholastic-based sponsorships. But also there can be a revenue opportunity for these affiliates and others as well that could help then grow and build more opportunities for students. I don't have the right answer or the model, but I do see kind of two camps forming. And by the way, those camps are also starting to reach into what is middle school, what is college, and building some of these pipelines. So to me, it's going to be very interesting to follow this story and see how it continues to go. But if I had to bet on a model right now, it would be free competition, free access to educational resources, and then some type of feedback so we can empower and appropriately, pay or compensate or what have you, the people on the ground doing the work with students, making those local decisions that's best for that community. To me, that's the model that I see growing, but I'm also wishing into existence a bit.
Well, the thing that I know is when you put those two models side by side, look, there's no reason I'm going to pay for this. There just isn't. You couldn't make me pay. And you have to come in with something really, like even titles. The PlayVS, I hate to keep going back to this, but PlayVS has the exclusivity with Riot. Okay. Sure. So they can have League of Legends seasons. There's those 7 dirty words that you can't use: season, league, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Somebody should put that in the chat now. Don't use these words. Yes.
Yeah. You can't use these words.
According to the RSAA. Yes.
But what we did was, okay, well, let's just there's nothing that says we can't run a series of invitationals back to back to back to back. So let's just do a series of invitationals and we're going to point value it like you would with NASCAR. We're not calling it a league. We're not calling it a season. It's just a series of cups.
Sure.
So, it's amazing how these companies are trying to, I guess, force people into. I hate using pay to play, and I don't know why it causes like an HSCL or a PlayVS to bristle at that phrase pay to play. But let's be real, it's pay to play. And I look at these things and go, well, wait a second, League of Legends is free for me to download. I can get a copy of, and I know it's intellectual property and all that, but
sure.
I use this as a teaching tool. I don't use this as a competitive tool. Again, we are not a pipeline to the pros. You're saying at the collegiate level, you see that. We have to, again, start to break this idea that Scholastic Esports, even between college and high school, is very different. And we are not the pros. We have very different reasons. And I think that's where there's a major disconnect, is a lot of these companies don't care. I mean, they just
and that very well could be true. And again, I have some personal experience with some and a casual relationship with others. I'm having conversations with all of them. But I guess it's ultimately, to me, what is the goal? Is it the goal of the organization to do right by students and provide opportunities, and that's the best business model, then to make some money as well, which again, nothing wrong with that, depending on how you capture that value. Or is this, insert esports because it's the hot thing, and it could be, it could be AI, VR, it could be virtual esports with a headset on next year or down the road, or it could be underwater basket weaving in 10 years. That, to me, they're pushing widgets, and they just happen to find the hot widget right now. And I've chosen not to be part of that environment because I don't think it ultimately has the best interests of schools and students at hand. And selfishly, I don't think it's going to help grow our ecosystem, which I really want to flourish and be part of because I have a lot of fun doing it. And if we can
let's hit on that for a minute. Too many people forget. We're teachers. We're not professional gamers. We love to have fun. And the fact that we get to play video games in school and get to promote video games in school and promote these type of competitions, damn it, if you're not having fun doing this, you're doing it wrong. Wrong. It
is super fun. And I get value out of playing with them, helping facilitate this. But I also I selfishly get a ton of value out of, I hate to say it that way, but I do. I have relationships with these students that are now just graduating from college. And again, like I said, they still carry me when we play League every once in a while. And these are building relationships, and to see these young men and young women grow and hopefully self-actualize and are on the way to that. That's what I want to be part of. And I think we have that opportunity to do that. And I think it cheapens it in a way if that's not baked into the guideposts of where we're headed with this. I don't want to sound like I'm on my soapbox and preaching.
This is the place to be on a soapbox and to preach.
Thank you. But to me, this is my choice, and I want to be part of an organization. It's why I'm a board member with NASEF now, and I appreciate NASEF being welcoming to me and helping me be part of that. That, to me, NASEF is on the right side of this. Are there issues with competition? Did we forget somebody here or there with a small? Yes, we're a growing institution as well, but I love this shared responsibility of there's top-down opportunities coming from NASEF, and these affiliates locally are providing opportunities bottom up and have choice and voice and could do right by their students. To me, that's the bigger picture, kind of this model of where we're at. And again, to bring it back to what I think is kind of the theme of our talk now, not that we planned it, but it's about educating yourself about these opportunities and taking that second level look at what this is all about and making informed decisions. Because if certain models work for you and your school and your students, amen, go do it. I want to push on what I think is the best opportunities, again, sustainably and doing right by students and schools. I won't say that anymore because I know I've said that a lot. So.
No. Sometimes I think it needs to be said over and over, especially because there are a lot of, plus there's people checking in, gosh knows at what time. So, because we're putting this out on LinkedIn, we're getting a lot of LinkedIn comments. I love seeing this, especially that Stephen Reed and Danny Martin are in here because those are two people who I admire greatly. Because I feel like they've got the right mindset for this space. But let me ask you this now. Going for play again, we extracted you. Tom Turner. I think Tom Turner, who is over in Orange County School District, we used to say is there a secret code so we know to extract Clint from PlayVS when it's time or whatever. He before that he's like, you got to get to know this guy because he's amazing. And I love that with the fact that Tom speaks so highly of you, even when you were supposedly on the other side.
Yeah. So just if I may add a short snippet here,
sure.
There's certain people in our industry, one in particular that likes to take credit for building Scholastic Esports. We'll let that person be unnamed.
Sure.
But I think people like Tom Turner, yourself, Garvey Candela, Gerald Solomon, others, I don't want to point to any one person because it took a village to do this to date, and it's going to take a far larger village, a city, to continue to do this. So by anyone claiming the mantle of, the founder of Scholastic or the godfather, or who knows what we call it now. These people were in the trenches and had an idea and did it. I remember the day Tom Turner called me. He said, I Googled high school esports and I found you in New London, Connecticut. Hi, I'm Tom Turner. And it was great helping, be a thought a thoughtful friend with Tom on how to start Orange County Esports. And then Gerald Solomon came in and the Sam Welly Foundation, thank you very much, and really created NASEF. And it was this wonderful, county to continent kind of story, and it adds a ton of value. So those people should not be forgotten. But and one of the reasons why I like to talk about that often is I want to inspire those students that we're hopefully empowering to write their own stories so they can be part of kind of this collective knowledge of how this happened and how we're getting to where we are now and hopefully our very bright future.
And Stephen, and this is a great point Stephen dropped into chat about the teacher skill development in the esports space. This is something when James Kozacek and I were talking, we called it Esports EDU. This goes back 3+ years ago. We were talking about developing this very PlayVS-like model called Esports EDU. I think we still have the domain somewhere. But I harped on, guys, we have to do teacher PD. You're talking about giving teachers who don't know what's going on, they don't know the culture, who are going to have to run these things. I think it doesn't get enough play. And that's the thing I really appreciate about the work that NASEF has done in the last couple of years, especially hiring somebody to just oversee this, the Scholastic Fellows program. Yep. I had Jarrell on recently. Jarrell oversees the Scholastic Fellows. I think that is so important and is so easily missed and is something that is so easily overlooked, especially now I know these for-profit orgs have started to do this a little bit, but it can't just be, here's how you coach esports. It's got to be, let's look at your entire ecoverse of education and connect it in those kind of ways. And I think that's where a lot of this gets missed too, especially as we're trying to develop these teachers who can support these kids in these spaces. If
you don't follow Dr. Miles Harvey, a fellow with the NASEF program down in New Mexico, he is a thought leader and just an awesome human being that's doing this. And one of his pieces that he posted just the way, I believe he's the author, was talking about what this looks like in teacher preparation. So I'm not discounting this need for PD, although I would love to dive into what that PD looks like very, very concretely. But even prior to that, when we're preparing teachers at the university level, this should be not just on their radar screen. It shouldn't be just on their radar screen, but we should be talking about soft skills and experiences that students should be having and their choice and voice as all part of this. And this is a perfect example of what that could look like. And then connect those teachers to this community, because that's the PD, not to jump to that, but that is the type of PD that I would want to see. It's not we have every, one Wednesday a month, and the kids leave early and we're going to do our 2 hours. It's the professional learning community approach, much like the fellows program with NASEF is set up on how do you build that knowledge, how do you transfer some of the information, and then how do I have a support system around me to construct that and do it on my own or with a team and reflect on that and fail and get picked back up and answer questions, et cetera, et cetera.
I agree with you 100%. And I was using, and I, to the audience, yes, professional development in our world, in the education world, is a term that is very broad, we shall say. It's incredibly broad. It can be as simple as looking at a video to in-depth, as you said, cohorts and things like that. Now, let me ask you this, because you have made the transition to NASEF. You're a board member for the new NASEF. When you look back and you look to the future, well, let's look back first. When you look back, you're going, man, boy, I really wish we could have done this a lot sooner. What's something that maybe you look at and go, gosh, I really wish we could have done this sooner?
Boy, that's a good question. This is going to sound a bit odd to our audience, but I think a scaffolded step, if I'm looking through my athletic lens first, because you said look back. So forgive me. I'm not endorsing this as the lens, but if we look through an athletic lens, they're not as popular as obviously some of the top half dozen esports, but using 2K, FIFA, Madden, and others as a potential a learning kind of crutch or scaffolding for those who don't understand the industry, are not necessarily gamers and the like, to be that pivot point so we can spend less time talking about the ins and outs of a particular game, last hitting, warding, what have you, and more get to the conversation faster around soft skills, community building, engaging students that are not being engaged in their schools right now, et cetera, et cetera. That to me could have been an interesting way or a better catalyst to get more people to not only to the table, but listening at the table. Would be one suggestion. Again, I'm not endorsing the athletic model necessarily, although I don't necessarily have a problem with it. But to me, we could have enlisted a huge army of folks who understand sports, understand the inherent values, could quickly start talking about esports, but also some of those affordances that esports provide access to above and beyond what traditional sports do, which is one of the reasons why I'm so excited about esports. I think it's that and more. So yeah, that would be one strategy. I would love to go back for a day and change.
And that's, in fact, one of your Scholastic fellows that you have right now in the NASEF program, Mr. Travis Witt, who is from Racine, is also the football coach one of the football coaches for Park High School. And in fact, they're doing a spring season. We did not do our fall season, so he's doing spring. So he's doing both esports and football. So
gotcha. And I hope he's being appropriately paid. But anyway, that's another topic.
Yes. No, I pay our people. And I'm going to put it out there. We pay all year. It is because I see this as a year-long commitment. It is not a 3-month commitment or whatever. And granted, taxes take a hit because these guys come to me and go, boy, taxes are really get us. But I'll tell you, it's $5,000 for the year.
Yeah, and it's which may or may not be
worth every penny.
Which is great. And I think that I'm happy you highlighted that, because in the current athletic model of esports, with a fall and a spring season, or however we break it down with tournaments in between, we are asking these very well-intentioned, thoughtful people in our schools to go far beyond a typical season. And that needs to be part of the solution as well, figuring out a way to reimburse them appropriately, et cetera, et cetera. And to be honest, I would prefer we do less of this, lock into a season and so forth. And I would like to provide, 45 or 50 weeks of competition every year. Now, before anybody gets mad at me for saying that but putting more of the onus on the schools and the students and the teams so that they can opt in and use that as raw materials and compete when appropriate, when right for the students, when right for the school and the coach and so forth. I think we're getting too locked into these. And how many times I've heard stories of a school getting a program propped up and ready to go, and the season started a week ago, and it's feels bad, man, because I'm like, Don't worry, 6 months, you're going to be all set. We're going to have a new season going and you're good to go. That is not the way we should be educating, providing opportunities and the like. So I'd love to see that change, and stay tuned.
And that's what we've done even with our cups, the League of Legends cups. We did our first 2 weeks, and I said, you know what? We got spring break coming up. Good Friday, when we had been starting, I said, let's take these next 10 days. We're going to, and the UGC people have been spectacular. Jeremy at UGC put together a survey. He's like, let's find out what's working, what's not. Let's tweak this now, and then we'll come back and we'll do the final cups. And to me, I like that model more because, I even have one team right now who said, we have a play coming up, and a lot of the kids are in the play and we can't participate. Well, if it's a normal season, guess what? You're forfeiting the next several weeks.
Sure.
I said to them, hey, you come back in a couple of weeks. We've got a brand new cup. We got a brand new format. You can still earn points.
Great.
I don't see where this is such a negative.
The amount of time I've been asked by athletic directors, well, aren't you going to steal my football players? And now let's expand that out to theater and music and all these other things that I really value, and I do not want to be part of the problem by removing opportunities for students. Right. I want this to be in addition to, and I want them to get their homework done, and I want them to sleep hopefully 8 hours a night. Probably not. It'd be nice if they had dinner with mom and dad every once in a while. So there's a way for us to structure this so that those things can happen, or at least there's a higher likelihood of those happening without removing other opportunities for students. We're doing too much of that as a profession in education anyway these days. That's a rat hole we probably don't want to go down, but yes. So we should be part of the solution, not the problem,
Well, you're talking to me because I was one of those kids who did band, choir, or not. I did plays. So I did the musicals. I was in football and track. You couldn't put me what group did you hang out with? Yes. I hung out with all of them in high school. I wasn't a popular kid, but I liked doing a little bit of everything. So there's always those kids like that. And then there's also the kids we have to realize too, who this is that one thing.
Sure.
And we have to provide them as much opportunities to have this. You can't just say it's 3 months and then for the next 6 months go off and go do nothing.
Yeah.
we need to have these for everybody. So.
We're in the business of engaging students, whether we see that as our job or not as educators. It's not just putting it out there and they choose to accept or do or not. This isn't college. This is high school and middle school and the like. And yes, our job is to engage. And this is such a wonderful way to do it, because we haven't even gotten into all the sundry other options and so forth. Not every kid has to be I want to be varsity Rocket League player and win a state title. For every one kid I had like that when I was coaching in New London, I had 2 or 3 other students that just wanted to hang out. They didn't have a lot going on at home. They were probably going home to an empty house. They wanted to be scrimmage partners. They wanted to talk about the meta. They wanted to design a new character. They wanted to build a logo. They wanted to organize a tournament, once a month and, sell snacks and, play Smash on the side. There's ways to engage those students, and they had a home. And I'd have to kick them out at 6:30 because I wanted to stay married. So, there were these pieces to it that we should be engaging students and providing those opportunities. But there's speed bumps to that, and dollars are that, and access to school and access to late buses, et cetera, that we're still working through at scale across the country, because it is new.
Yeah. Now, I've been I've been moving the conversations to a half hour. We're already about 15 minutes over, which is fine, because I knew that this was going to go deep and long on the conversation. But the follow up to this, that question, of course, is looking into the future. Again, now you're with a nonprofit organization. You've been in the private sector with this. Where do you see us? Again, you said that private sector may change in the next couple of years.
Sure.
Who knows?
Sure.
What do you wish or hope for the foreseeable future? One thing at least going forward.
Sure. I oh God, you're gonna make me pick one. Yeah.
We're trying to keep these shows a half hour. We're already 15 minutes over.
I don't remember signing a contract that said I had to keep it at 45. No, I'm kidding.
That's fine. Let's just keep going.
Yeah. One thing.
Or if you can't sum it up, if it's like a whole ecoverse thing,
it really is. It's I want to have as many conversations with as many people as I possibly can to have a dialogue about, first and foremost, the value of this. I'm not interested in those conversations like, is it a sport or not, or even necessarily which title is best or how cool it is or why a certain title isn't appropriate. Valorant, it's ESRB is 13 plus, but God forbid we put that in a school or something like that. I guess what I really am most focused on, and this is exactly where I started, was and I'm going to steal actually this slogan from a company that I've been working with called We Think. It's for those that are interested, WeThinkInc.us. I'm not associated with the company. I'm just a huge fan. And they want to build better humans. And one could see that as very superficial and maybe a throwaway tag. But when you peel back, what they're doing is they're using esports in a structured fashion to identify these soft skills and sub skills and so forth, be able to measure them, both qualitatively and quantitatively, and then provide opportunities within games, multiple titles, not one game, to kind of remediate or build skills within those areas. So there's a lot of self-reflection, but they're also doing it from a team-based approach. And anytime that I can have conversations around those opportunities, because I'm going to steal from Steve Jobs in this way, I would like to put a very small, whatever my small dent is in the universe, I'd like to do that. And what I have found makes me happy, and I think I can add value in, is how can we help students build those soft skills and be part of the conversation. And it's ultimately not about esports. It's how can I build those skills and have experiences, successful experiences, failed experiences, and so forth, and then transfer those skills, habits of mind, knowledge to other domains. Now, I've seen it done anecdotally over and over again. I've experienced it myself. I've seen it in students and others. I don't necessarily have empirical evidence or research studies that say we can transfer those skills, habits of mind, and so forth to other domains, but I think we can, and I think there's real value in pushing on that, because we live in a world that has these large, global, ill-defined problems where the answers aren't in textbooks. So if we can continue to have experiences in schools and outside of schools where students are finding problems and solutions and testing them outside of an answer being in a textbook somewhere, my hope is then they can then be better humans by taking that into the world and solving some of these other large problems that we as a global society are facing. That was definitely soapboxy, but that's what I believe.
Well, and I want to add to what you were saying, because I believe in everything you were saying. The one thing that I will add to it that I call me a communist, I don't know. But, again, with everything that we're doing, when you were just talking about, all I still pictured was individual score, individual experience. What we know this is that we do better than I think most everybody else does right now with esports is community. I think NASEF has done an amazing job helping to build these various communities, both professional for teachers, for kids. I think we've done a great job in our schools developing communities for kids, so long as we're, again, thinking along the lines of this is for everybody. This isn't for a few, boys. This is for boys and girls, and finding, like what Dr. Haskell does, add chairs to the room. We want to bring in as many people as we can to this experience. I hope as we build these better humans that they take, if we're building these communities right, that they take that sense of community and just go, you know what? We built it here through esports. I want to build it in this. I want to build it in my own hometown. I want to be able to have our systems of government operate this way. I want to have my workplace be this kind of community, because I think that's the thing that is so amazing with this is it's all built around a passion around gaming. And I think that once these kids realize and people realize that the passions that we all share are more important than the way we identify ourselves, whether gender or, how we identify with socioeconomics or culture, I think that will start, hopefully, people realizing that we're a lot more alike than we are different, and that those things that we really are passionate about and care about are much more important than the things that other people tell us we should be passionate or care about, that
Yes.
necessarily we don't.
I'm all in, and let's have some fun while we're doing it. I'm totally down with that.
And I'll tell you this: if you can ever get me playing League of Legends, I'm probably way worse than you are. So.
Well, I am a Sona main League, and now I'm a Sona main in Wild Rift. And the beauty of Sona is I could just kind of put my forehead down on the keyboard and add value as a Sona main. It's a little harder on a cell phone, so I'm going to have to figure something out here at some point. So, but again, that's why you have wonderful students to carry you. That's a part of the benefits of doing this.
And I'm not going to slip us into this other conversation, but 5G technology. Oh boy.
It'll be interesting. I'm also thinking Starlink, could we have equal bandwidth and equal, ping times across the globe and really have I guess, I don't know if we put servers in orbit as well. It'd be a good way to keep them cool. But think about the equity that we can have. I'm not necessarily a esports in the Olympics guy, but I see huge value in pulling communities all around the globe, bonding and creating a working relationship and a fun relationship via esports. And then maybe we'll turn the page and talk about some of these other topics that we could be working on together and having critical conversations to solve. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, exactly. Precisely. Dr. Clint Kennedy, this has been such a great conversation. There's going to be a lot and look, we're going to have to do this again because, again, like I said, we can't talk about the 5G stuff because we can't go down that rabbit hole, but we gave people a taste. And I know Stephen Reed, who's watching this, is probably going, I want to be in on this conversation too. I know how he is. To all the people who also participated in the chat, thank you so much for contributing. And Dr. Kennedy, thank you for being a guest today on the Academy of Esports podcast.
Thank you, Jim, for this and having this platform. And I like to think of myself as a learner. So if anybody has concerns, constructive criticism, or wants to have a dialogue to make us all better, please feel free to reach out. I always appreciate it.
That will do it for this week on the Academy of Esports. I've been your host, James O'Hagan. Esports are organized competitive video games allowing schools to redefine their athletic culture, diversify opportunities for student participation, promote good physical and mental health, increase collegiate scholarship pathways, and play games. We can never forget the importance of play. The mission of the Academy of Esports is to support these ideals. The vision of the Academy of Esports is for all students to experience the fun and joy of playing competitive video games. You may follow me on Twitter at Jim O'Hagan. That's at JimOhagan, and through the Academy of Esports account at TAO Esports. It's a great way to get the latest blog posts, podcast episodes, and news coming out of esports and education. And remember, You can continue your engagement by going to www.taoesports.com. You can also connect through Facebook at www.facebook.com/TAOesports. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to our time again next week.